Last time on an Uneducated review.
I'm giving New York a 0 out of 10.
Nunican's the answer to...
Yeah.
A 0 out of 10.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Whoa!
Hello everybody, my name is Nunican and welcome back to the Uneducated Review series, aka Place Review. Today we're going to be looking at New Orleans, or New Orleans, whichever pronunciation makes you the most happy.
This is Captain John Smith. We're heading into Nolans. We're 150 miles from the field, and you're just like, grrr, you're just grating on. And the two that you should never ever say will be Nolans and New Orleans. Who gets a pass on New Orleans? British people. You have to kind of ease them.
So without further ado, let's begin. First of all, I think it's important to say that I went there from Michigan, and we did not cheat. We did not take a plane. We did it the old-fashioned American way and drove all the way to New Orleans, which totaled to around like a 17-hour drive, if I remember correctly. All I remember was that was not good for my body. I tell you what, who would have thought that being in a car for hours on end might cause you some issues? I was cramping up, I felt sick for a lot of it, and even once I got to my destination, finally, I was still feeling sick for the whole next day just from being in the car all cooped up. Oh boy, that was no good. Luckily for my deteriorating health and digestive system, we stopped for the night at a hotel. Beautiful sunrise, we were off, we were going, and it felt like so much longer than I would have expected it to be, even though we already got done 10 of the hours. I will say, if I travel there again, I would much rather, take a plane, or maybe, some faster mode of travel, maybe even, disintegration, and then replacing of atoms upon arriving. Anything better than being cooped up in that car for that long. Whew. One thing that I can actually give credit to the ride there for is there's actually a decent variety in what you're actually seeing outside of your window. You could see some mountainous terrain, you could see some lakes, you could see some hills, except for going through Indiana, which, as I've established before, is just all fields. You know my opinion on Indiana. You've seen that video. Hopefully, if you haven't, check it out. New Orleans would also mark the farthest I've been from home ever in my entire existence on this earth. New York being a not-so-close second to that. As soon as I entered the city, there was one theme that really was apparent as soon as you looked at it, right? And that theme is diversity. Diversity of culture, diversity of architecture, diversity of people, just a very varied area. And I tell you what, it may have not just been my goldfish brain when I was in New York that stopped me from appreciating every building we looked at. The buildings in New York, although really cool architecture, they were not as varied as the buildings in New Orleans. Even though the buildings in New Orleans not particularly, like huge or anything, at least not the ones that I saw. The color schemes were all very different from one another, and they all seemed to have their own kind of story to them. They seemed like most of them were kind of old buildings, but they all had a lot of life to them. It's not like, some abandoned buildings or something, but it also wasn't modernism to the point of losing personality. There was a lot of personality, a lot of texture, and a lot of just interesting stuff in New Orleans. So what I'm gonna do, and this is usually in my series Stock Exchange, but I'm gonna put in the description below a lot of the different textures that I got from New Orleans, because I took a lot of pictures of things just to get color reference and textures, and I would like to make that available to you for whatever projects you would like to use it for. Whether it's 3D stuff or adding texture to your digital drawings, whatever. But moving on. Let us for a moment talk about the food in New Orleans, okay? I've been dying to talk about the food all day. Listen, there was so much variety and culture in New Orleans because of its history, which I may or may not get to later in the video, blah blah blah, that there is literally like any kind of food that you'd want. But there's also a lot of cultures kind of merging and kind of combining ideas as far as cooking goes, giving us very interesting cuisine. Now, admittedly, I don't really know the history of any of these foods to any deep degree that I would really be able to educate you on, so just look them up if you're interested. All I can speak to is the flavors, and let me tell you, they got some flavors. For one of the breakfasts, we had these things called beignets, which I believe is the French pronunciation. I can't pronounce things from other languages. I'm a hometown Michigan boy. We also went to this really good po' boy place, which is basically like a sandwich, kind of like a sub type thing. It's really messy, but really tasty. Probably the best sandwich that I've had in my memory. From what I've heard, apparently they originated as kind of like a cheap meal for working class people, but then kind of branched out and turned into this kind of more expensive meal with, better ingredients, whatever, but keeping the name. Listen, you don't come to me for the historical details and all the facts. If you look at the title of this series, it's called an uneducated review, so I can only assume that you're watching this because of my dashing good looks. That's right, gaze upon my godly features. You may not like it, but this is what peak YouTuber body looks like. I also went to this place called the New Orleans School of Cooking, which was basically more of a demonstration of cooking than actually a school. We didn't actually handle any ingredients or anything. We did get to taste the food, and we did get to see them make the food and talk about the history of the food. I wish I would have recorded it. However, I didn't really know if I was allowed to bring my camera in there, so I erred on the side of caution. The foods he made in that class were gumbo, jambalaya, and some bread pudding, and let me just say, all delicious.
Nunican? I'll never be a real chef.
Something I'll talk about real quick that you could probably go into on a deeper level if you really wanted to, but I really did enjoy seeing musicians on the street, getting paid a little bit and kind of adding life to the city, even though it was around COVID times, which it still is, unfortunately, but in a way there's kind of a silver lining because it was less busy. So we got to enjoy the music, we got to enjoy the city without being trampled by crowds of drunk people. Oh, and I'd be remiss if not to mention Mardi Gras, which hadn't quite started yet when we were there, but people were definitely preparing for it. There were a lot of very cool decorated houses because they weren't doing the floats that year, again, because of COVID. But yeah, not a whole lot to say there. It's just cool to see that stuff around. We also went to a couple of record stores, which were way cooler looking and way more well-stocked than any ones that I've seen before in my life. Got to pick up this Hail Mary Mallon record, which is one of my favorites, and I never thought that I would see it in an actual record store. I assumed if I was to ever purchase it, it would be online. So really cool to see some of that more niche stuff in the record stores, as well as some local artists. I didn't purchase any of those records, however, it was really cool to see that they had local artists there, and maybe next time I'll give it a shot. If you are the city of New Orleans and you somehow became sentient and are now watching a Nunican TV video, welcome, for one, and for two, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself. You're probably feeling, oh, he's gonna give me a 10 out of 10. Finally, we get the 10 out of 10 score out of Nunican. But you would be incorrect. You see, when I was walking down the street, I wasn't looking where I was going, and there was a piece of cement sticking out of the ground slightly, and I tripped, and I fell, and it kind of hurt my knee. And for that reason, and that reason alone, Orleans, whichever. It's a 0 out of 10. That's right, Nunican wins once again.
You should never ever say will be Nolans and New Orleans.
Nunican 3, the world 0. Just wait until the next episode where I review a different place.
You said New Orleans for the last time.
By the way, a quick side note, did anyone else when they were a kid used to think that Louisiana looked like a train? I don't know why, but that shape said train to me. Until recently I looked at it and I was like, wait a second, nope, that's just a soggy boot with the sole deteriorating into the ocean. I think it may have just been me.